All right, dealing with some audio issues as usual. Good thing I caught them early on. I was trying to use our old mic, but for some reason that ain't working. And I wonder if it's my camera or if it's my mic. So let's find out. All right, so Hellbound. This is a show that Kaylee and I watched together when it first came out. We watched episode 1 of season 1 because we try to keep up on all of the horror. And we didn't get back to it for some reason. And season 2 dropped a few weeks ago. And I decided, like, I want to watch these horror shows. Kaylee and I just don't have the time to get to all the shows. Movies are only like an hour and a half, but TV shows, especially ones with multiple seasons, I mean, those are 10, 20 hours. So those are much harder to fit into a day and discuss when we're trying to watch so many other things and also, live a life. So I sat down and I watched both of these seasons back to back. Now, what is this about? So this is a Korean show, not necessary to say South since North doesn't make anything like this. This is a show about people who are bound for hell. Yeah, hellbound. So the way this works is there is an angel, or seemingly an angel, that appears in front of you, just the face of it, and it tells you the exact time that you're going to die. It could be an hour, it could be years, it could be, whatever. But when you do, you are bound for hell. Now, there's rumblings of this, that it's happening, but of course people think like this is BS. Of course, no way. And then it happens in public to a man who is at like a coffee shop, and a bunch of people catch it on camera. And then there's a mother who also gets her decree on camera, and that's broadcast to the world. And then a new religious organization wants to broadcast her demonstration for the world to see. And they're going to pay her a couple million for her kids to leave behind so that she can give them something, because she's poor, she don't have nothing. And they're going to give the kids, she's going to die anyway, so it's like, I'll give your kids a good stability. And she agrees to it, and her demonstration is broadcast for the world to see. And after this, everyone freaks out, because now they live in a world where not only is hell real, but randomly people who seemingly are sinners? They don't know, are getting bound for hell and are being beaten to death and burned alive by these 3 monsters that appear at your time of death, as stated by the angel face in the sky. I loved this show. I don't understand the lower ratings that this show has, especially in its second season. I think the second season's episodes are all in like the 6s on IMDb, which is just absolutely crazy to me. When I saw that the ratings had dropped, and I saw a bunch of reviews being like, love season 1, but what happened with season 2? I don't know what the hell they're talking about. I loved both seasons. I think there's so much going on in here. When I talk about religious horror, we talk about that on the channel quite often, because they release like 50 of them a year, where they do like an exorcism or possession or something religiously horror. And I'm not usually a fan of it because it's always so small scale to me. I always think like, isn't this supposed to be like biblical? Isn't this supposed to be widespread? Isn't this like a global issue that Satan's going to take over, and everyone's going to be on hell on earth, or whatever. So a little girl in a bedroom being exorcised by 2 priests, and her holding back her powers because too much vulgar display of power, like, that gets old. I love The Exorcist, but when you see that same film 100 times, it gets extremely old. It's like, okay, can we ever, I don't know, like elevate this? Can we ever make the threat bigger? Can we ever do that? You know, we got End of Days with Arnold Schwarzenegger or something where that actually feels like it has global stakes. But in this one, this is one where everyone's affected. This creates absolute mass panic, as it would for sure. I mean, that's so believable because a lot of us, you know, at the end of the day, I feel like most people, if not everyone, is at least partially agnostic. I think most people do have some wiggle room in their brain to say, you know what, like I'm gonna live a good life. I'm gonna try to do the best things. Uh, I believe in this specific thing, maybe or whatever, but I don't know. Like I don't know. But to get absolute confirmation that for sure there is a hell. And if you do these specific things, whatever those things may be, you're going to get a decree and be executed by these three beasts that cannot be stopped and go to hell. That would turn the world upside down. And oh boy, does this turn the world upside down. The rise of the religious factions in this and how they take over the new truth and then kind of like their thugs, the arrowheads, man, that just felt so realistic to me. You know, it's like a new form of government that is based off, it's like a theocracy, right? We live under religious rule. And there's these people who they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. They don't know why people are being damned to hell, but they want to provide an answer. They want to provide some sense of clarity, some sense of semblance of reason, right? So they come out and they now are off the backs of this guy who was like the prophet, who had said that this was going to happen and no one was listening. And then, of course, once it happens, they all start to listen, and he is what ends up forming the new truth. But then something happens with him, and another guy takes over. And of course, they just, you know, espouse nonsense rhetoric to take power, right? This is all a big power grab. There's this vacuum that is created when all of what we know is pulled down, and these people seize the opportunity in the moment to fill in that question mark and assert that they have the answers. And everyone, of course, bows to them because they don't want to go to hell. So they follow this group and commit whatever horrible acts that they say, or follow their doctrine, which of course they're all just making up because nobody knows why these angels appear and why these people are going to hell. They, of course, they're talking about sinners, and, you know, it's because this, and they try to come up with these reasons for why these people, you know, they try to expose their past and be like, this is that. Now, the show itself, couple things. Number one, yes, the CGI on the monsters that come and take them is off-putting. I don't like the design of them. I actually think they're rather silly looking. The CGI on them themselves, I don't like. I don't think is very good. And I think this actually turns more people off to the show than it should, because while they are an important aspect of the show, and yes, I would have preferred them to look better and scarier and you know, whatever. I don't care. I don't care because I think the show is so strong otherwise that I just completely look past it. And now, like when they come on screen, because they're in the show a lot, like they kill a lot of people. There's decrees and demonstrations fairly often in the show. I don't care. I have actually come to accept them, and that's what they look like, and whatever. I'm moving on from that. Another thing with this show is that it's a little hard to follow. Not only because of like the name issue, because a lot of Korean names are not something that I'm used to. So when people are saying like Park Jun-hao and Park Jun-ha, I'm like, oh, fuck, who? Like I had a really hard time following the names. So when people were talking about specific people, I did get accustomed to a few names because they repeat them so much, and they're attached to specific characters that are such integral parts of the show that I was kind of like, okay, I think I got their name. Park Jung Sing, I think is the other. I know this is what I'm saying. It's very complicated there for me, just as just as an American who's not familiar with names like this. So that was a tough one. But there's also a lot of time jumps. There's a lot of time jumps that happen throughout the show, and there's a bunch of moving parts. There's a bunch of things going on, and with all the time jumps happening, because like season 1 almost feels like 2 parts. There's the first part of season 1, which is like the genesis of things, and then we move to years later, and the time jump isn't super obvious at first, but then you start to realize like, okay, that's what's going on here. But I do think the time jumps are important to the story, because we need to see the evolution of how this has affected the world. And those kinds of things, while people would change overnight, the world wouldn't change overnight like this, to this magnitude, where these people have amassed a following and has created an organization and have statues and have these museums of past demonstrations set up for people to come and look at, to repent and to follow them and all of this stuff. So I do think all of those time jumps are necessary, but it does make the show somewhat hard to follow. The name stuff, of course, I had an issue with. And the story itself is a bit complicated at first, but I stuck with it. And then I even watched some recap videos to refamiliarize myself with moments, to be like, oh, okay, so that's what's happening here. That's this character. This is how it's related to this. Got it. As soon as I got those things, especially with season 1, and then season 2 was mostly, I was fine. But it was hard to follow a bit at first, for sure. But once I started to really like get everything, I was really, really into this one. I thought the ideas here and the allegories, the metaphors, the social commentary about religion and control, I thought was extremely, extremely well done and well thought out, and thought-provoking. I of course started to think about, like, what if this did happen? Like, what if people did start acknowledging and understanding that there is absolutely a hell, that there is no more debate, that there is no more questioning, like, oh, is it this or is it that? Like, absolutely knowing without a shadow of a doubt, because there is 100% unequivocal truth, right? Undeniable, that would completely change the world, right? People would become completely religiously obsessed. And I completely understand to a degree, but the level of religious fanaticism can't be understated here. And I found to be one of the most compelling elements of the show, because I do believe that is how chaotic it would become. The followers and the people that, people want to turn to leaders for strength when they're afraid. And, they just do what they want, right? And a lot of people who rise to power like that, they don't have your best intentions at heart, right? They're just doing it to fulfill their own earthly desires, their own selfishness and whatever. So, but some of the people in here, you have these like influencers who are very boisterous and wear ridiculous get-ups and face makeup, and are like very anarchists. Yeah, I don't know why I kept stumbling over that word, but I think I was trying to say it right the whole time. It just didn't feel right, because I wanted to say anarchy, and I don't know, whatever happened there. But yeah, I found all that stuff so believable, so angering, and so entertaining. These people who come up and rise up and create these massive followings, and there's so many horrible things that happen in here, and you're just sitting back like, wow, people are insane. Wow, people really never cease to amaze me with how crazy they actually can be. So I really, really enjoyed that stuff. Believe it or not, there's actually some fantastic action sequences in here. I wasn't expecting that at all, but there is this badass lawyer. She starts as some lawyer of the original girl who gets uh condemned, and then is put on display. Her demonstration. There's a lot of demonstrations that they air to the world to try to reinforce, like, you have to follow us if you want to be safe. Now, of course, this is all a big sham. As I said, they don't know what they're talking about, and there's a lot of inner working things where people are getting decrees and they're like hiding it. Anyway, but this lawyer, something happens to her, and then she comes back better than ever, and there's some really great fight sequences because she's like a total martial arts badass, and she's going through, and there's this really great sequence, a car chase in season 2, where she's like moving from car to car, and the camera movement and all that stuff, it reminded me of a lot of the bigger budgeted action films, with all that tricky, slick camera work of like going in and out of cars as they're, screeching around corners, and they're going through windows, and people are kicking windows out, and they're coming through, and they're jumping into other cars, and they're fighting inside the car, and the camera movements are all like robotic, mechanical, but like super stylistic. Like, I thought that shit was amazing. I was like really blown away, especially since the CGI on the monsters is leaves something to be desired. I thought that the action sequences when we get them are super super cool, and I also really liked the CGI on the bodies, and after they're burned, and something else that happens with them later on, I thought was really cool. There's a lot of twists that happen through, some big moments, some cliffhanger stuff that happens, and you're like, oh shit, how's this gonna change? And the ending of season 2 leaves it off in a place where you're like, oh shit, where are we going from here? So I was really excited for a season 3. I hope it gets renewed. I hope we get a third season, because now with where it leaves off, it is wild. Like, that is next level crazy. And I was like, oh shit, what do we do now? I really like all the stuff with there, and I think this show is also kind of hard to follow because there is no main character. So that's another thing with this show that I actually think is fairly unique, is that we have some main characters that surround the overall story, but there is no focal point of the show. This, like, the people, like, the whole endeavor, like the whole premise of the show is the focus. That is the sole focus of the show. We are never really truly focusing on one character and watching their journey. There's most shows, they have like a few characters that the majority of the focus all of the time is just them, and they're always the go-tos of this. As to where with this show, you have a detective who is like the main, it feels like one of the main characters, or the main character of the first few episodes, and then he just kind of vanishes for a while, and you don't see him again for quite a while. And then there's another character, the prophet guy, who's there for a little while, and then he kind of vanishes. And then you have, the lawyer character who kind of vanishes for a while, and then you have, and so on and so forth. So there's no main character focus, and I definitely think that can be off-putting to people who are used to every episode has to revolve around these 2 or 3 characters. Like, Mulder and Scully in the X-Files or something. Like, they're the focal point, the center of the show. They are the focus, and then the X-Files are external from there. That's what they investigate. But for this, it's the story is the most important aspects. The characters are secondary. I guess that's what I'm getting at. A lot of shows, characters are primary, story is secondary. This show is completely the opposite, which I appreciated. And as I said, with it being religiously based, and me not being a fan of religious horror because of the small scaleness of it, I really appreciated how global this felt, how this completely changed the world. And I felt like it changed it in a very believably inorganic way. I felt like the response from everyone felt genuine. I was genuinely like, yeah, yeah, this is probably how this would go down. Um, and of course, there's things that are unbelievable, right? Like you got this badass lawyer who's able to be a lawyer by day and a freaking vigilante Batman by night or something. That's a little ridiculous, right? It's a television show, but I was greatly entertained. I don't know why this show isn't getting more appreciation because I think it is really smart and very entertaining. So, anyways, these are always these one take stream of consciousness. Some people don't like this unscripted way I do things. You know, I think it upsets people because they want to have it very laid out, very clean, and uh, and I get that, but I don't know. This is the way I do things. So if I stumble over my words, if this is unappealing, this isn't the channel for you. But that's my thoughts on the matter. And yeah, I recommend the hell out of this. If this sounds interesting to you, obviously you get the gig. All right. Adios.